standoff at the Coyote Pass final showdown.
They called it family property, until Janelle called her lawyer. What if Coyote Pass was never theirs to begin with? In a family ruled by chaos disguised as faith, Mary Brown has emerged as the most unexpected strategist in a kingdom of self-inflicted delusion. When she brought up Janelle in the Coyote Pass land to Cody and Robin, she wasn't stirring drama. She was conducting reconnaissance. This was not a woman rambling about property lines. This was a woman who has spent years watching manipulation paraded as leadership and finally decided to play the same game, only better. The very idea that Janelle would casually discuss significant financial dealings with a woman she once deemed abusive over cleaning habits is almost comical. Yet there's a strange brilliance in it. Janelle likely knew Mary would carry that information straight to Cody and Robin. It's not betrayal, it's delegation. Janelle has always preferred to outsource the dirty work while maintaining an air of righteous detachment. Mary, who has long been branded the emotional liability of the sister-wife collective, proved instead to be the only one with any business instincts left. Watching the scene unfold, one could practically see Cody's tan deepen into crimson as Mary coolly suggested an appraisal of the land. The mere mention of accountability seems to give the man hives. When confronted with logic, he resorts to his usual slurry of circular excuses, the word salad that has long substituted for thought in his monologues. Mary's response, an understated lethal, "I'm sure they have appraisers in Flagstaff," landed with surgical precision. The silence that followed said everything. The irony, of course, is that Cody's reaction revealed more about him than any of the wives could. His first instinct was not to address fairness or legality, but to weaponize dislike. "Janelle doesn't even like Mary," he spat, as though the concept of decency only applies among friends. It was a masterclass in small-mindedness. For all his grand talk about faith and moral order, Cody Brown's guiding principle remains remarkably consistent. If he can't control the emotional narrative, he'll torch the ethical one. He spent decades thriving on division, maintaining power by keeping the women suspicious of one another. It was a strategy that worked beautifully when the wives still believed they were playing a spiritual game. Now that they see it for the con it always was, Cody's tactics read less like clever manipulation and more like the tantrums of a man shocked to find his subjects thinking for themselves. Mary, in contrast, has discovered something radical: leverage. By relaying her conversation with Janelle to Cody and Robin, she forced them to articulate, on camera no less, that the land would be divided evenly. It was both a legal safeguard and a public trap. Should they renege later, they'll have the footage to haunt them in court and syndication alike. One could almost admire her restraint. She didn't rant, she didn't plead. She simply let their discomfort do the talking. Cody's panic was palpable. His attempt to downplay the matter with vague mutterings about maybe selling it anyway collapsed under Robin's oblivious insistence that she didn't want to sell. The look he shot her could have peeled paint. For once, the dynamic duo found themselves off-script. Robin's usual theatrics, the fawning laughter, the well-timed tears, were absent. She sat cold, stripped of her sympathetic performance, watching the conversation spiral out of Cody's control. Robin, once the beneficiary of Mary's misplaced loyalty, now finds herself under the same scrutiny she helped cultivate. Her crocodile tears at Mary's moving day, arriving uninvited, crying performatively, and then leaving just as quickly, were a transparent attempt to reclaim moral high ground she no longer occupies. Mary's stony indifference during that display wasn't cruelty, it was revelation. The woman who once begged for crumbs of validation from this family now regards them with the calm detachment of someone who finally understands the scam. The symmetry is exquisite. For years, Mary was treated as the unstable one, the problem to be managed. Yet here she stands, calmly orchestrating the first real moment of accountability in their collective history. She's learned that nothing terrifies manipulators more than a target who has stopped reacting. Cody, who once believed himself the patriarchal genius, now sits red-faced and sputtering about appraisals while the woman he sidelined quietly secures her position. Even Janelle's motives, whether tactical or resigned, feed into this turning point. By involving Mary, intentionally or not, she forced the confrontation she didn't have the stomach to start herself. In some perverse way, the two women's mutual distrust became the most productive alliance of the entire saga. Their dislike has given them clarity. Each understands exactly who the enemy is, and neither is pretending it's each other. Meanwhile, Cody continues to misread every cue, assuming his wives share his moral rot. People like him always do. He confessed on television to considering cheating Janelle out of her share, apparently unaware that such honesty only confirms the suspicions he spent years denying. His worldview, marinated in narcissism and the faux masculine victimhood of the self-anointed red-pilled, permits no concept of integrity divorced from self-interest. He assumes everyone else must be as opportunistic as he is, because imagining decency would expose his own lack of it. It's a particularly toxic alchemy. Narcissism meets martyrdom, shaken with misogyny and served in a goblet of self-delusion. In his mind, he is not a failed patriarch but a misunderstood visionary oppressed by ungrateful women. The absurdity would be amusing if it weren't televised in real time. His self-pity is his only consistent asset, and it's depreciating rapidly. Still, the choreography of that conversation at Coyote Pass was telling. Cody, attempting to word vomit his way out of culpability, Robin, scrambling to maintain her carefully curated victimhood, and Mary, sitting quietly, knowing every word was being immortalized. The balance of power has shifted, not through confrontation, but through documentation. Mary doesn't need Cody's validation anymore. She has footage. And beneath the surface of their interactions lies the real tragedy. The dream of a united family was never built on faith, but on control. The plural marriage that was supposed to be a spiritual calling devolved into an LLC of emotional manipulation and financial dependency. Cody's authority was never moral, it was contractual. And now, those contracts, both literal and metaphorical, are collapsing. The irony is poetic. The man who insisted that God sanctioned his every whim now finds himself cornered by the legal and financial consequences of those same whims. The women he once dismissed as irrational are now the ones citing property law, appraisals, and ownership rights. Even Robin, in her clumsy attempts to appear virtuous, accidentally hands over arguments that could legally invalidate Cody's control of the land. It's almost Shakespearean. The Queen's misplaced loyalty may yet bring down the king. In this act of the drama, Mary is no longer the humiliated wife clinging to scraps of affection. She's the silent accountant tallying every deceit, every inequity, and preparing her invoice. Her newfound clarity isn't born of bitterness, but of exhaustion. The peace that comes from no longer caring whether the tyrant approves. Watching Cody flounder in the quicksand of his own deceit, one suspects Mary's composure isn't stoicism, it's satisfaction. Coyote Pass was meant to symbolize family unity. Instead, it has become the burial ground of Cody's authority. The wives he once controlled through rivalry now measure him with the detached amusement of people who have finally seen the trick revealed. The dream is over. The empire has fallen. And Mary, the supposed weak link, has quietly emerged as the only one who knows exactly where the bodies, and the deeds, are buried. If Coyote Pass were a morality play, the title would be The Gospel According to Grift. Every acre of that dusty expanse stands as a monument to bad math, worse ethics, and a patriarch who mistakes ownership for divinity. In theory, the land was to be the great unifying project, the celestial compound where the Browns would at last merge love and logistics. In practice, it has become a ledger of betrayal, each signature another reminder that the self-proclaimed prophet of plural harmony couldn't balance a checkbook, much less a family. Cody Brown's financial empire is a house of mirrors where equity and loyalty have always been interchangeable illusions. Every transaction seems to come with an emotional surcharge. The so-called family investments have, over the years, been nothing more than a series of unpaid debts to women who financed his delusions while he accused them of lacking faith. The distribution of the land tells the story clearly enough. Somehow, by cosmic coincidence, or more likely marital manipulation, Robin, the one wife who never worked a day outside her own melodrama, emerged with the largest share. She and Cody together control nearly 70% of the property, while Mary and Janelle are left with scraps they themselves paid for. One might call it favoritism. The more accurate term is embezzlement disguised as romance.
It's not as though Robin's prosperity sprang from divine favor. Her fortune is the direct result of other people's labor. Janelle's inheritance funded the family's first home. Her Las Vegas profits underwrote Robin's McMansion, and even her retirement savings, yes, her retirement, was siphoned off to pay Robin's credit card debt. In any other context, such financial parasitism would earn a lawsuit. In the Brown household, it earns tears, testimonials, and the occasional sanctimonious prayer circle. Cody's logic is as stunning as it is stupid. The man insists that everything is family, yet somehow every shared venture ends with Robin's name on the deed. It's a masterclass in selective collectivism. Socialism for him, capitalism for everyone else. Even Christine's property, once part of the group's portfolio, mysteriously found its way into Cody and Robin's private stash, with an extra 10% skimmed from Mary's portion for good measure. A celestial kingdom indeed, where salvation comes with a title transfer. The math is absurd but illuminating. Mary, the most loyal of them all, contributed her Vegas proceeds to Cody's so-called dream home, only to emerge with a pitiful 10% of Coyote Pass. Janelle, the primary earner and financial adult of the group, holds perhaps 20. Robin, the professional dependent, lounges on her 25, doubled by her legal claim to Cody's share. The result? The most industrious wives are left with empty hands, while the least productive one sits atop a mountain of other people's money. It's not plural marriage, it's pyramid finance with a wedding ring. And yet, Cody still parades his victimhood with the fervor of a man convinced that martyrdom is an accounting strategy. He laments the burden of 4 wives as though he were drafted into service by divine conscription. His favorite refrain, that the lifestyle is a sacrifice for the sake of the celestial kingdom, rings particularly hollow when paired with his penchant for sports cars and luxury homes. The man who claims to lead a humble, God-fearing household has somehow managed to turn communal living into a luxury brand for one. He preaches about unity while hoarding assets, about faith while manipulating finances. When questioned, he responds not with transparency but with emotional blackmail, accusations of disloyalty, spiritual weakness, or lack of family commitment. It's less leadership and more a prolonged gaslighting campaign designed to disguise theft as theology. Robin, for her part, plays her role with unconvincing sincerity. Her weeping declarations of fairness, her trembling insistence that she never wanted all this, might carry weight if she weren't sitting atop the spoils. Her McMansion, bought with money from Mary and Janelle's homes, was, according to her, a family investment. Indeed it was. A family investment with one name on the mortgage and everyone else footing the bill. The hypocrisy deepens when one recalls Robin's claim that the property divisions were temporary. A curious assertion, considering her apparent lack of enthusiasm for returning any of that temporary advantage. She even confessed that Cody assigned parcels without consulting anyone, an admission that, if true, legally voids the entire arrangement. It's almost poetic. In her eagerness to look innocent, Robin may have handed Mary and Janelle the very legal argument that could dismantle Cody's empire. Misrepresentation, lack of consent, unconscionability. Arizona law has a word for what happened at Coyote Pass: fraud. That Robin doesn't seem to grasp the implications is unsurprising. She's the kind of person who confuses sentiment for evidence, convinced that a quivering lip can substitute for documentation. But her ignorance may be the crack that finally topples the dynasty. If the contracts are voidable, Mary and Janelle can claim their rightful shares, and the sacred bond between Cody and his legal wife could become the family's most expensive mistake. The financial imbalance is only half the story. The psychological rot is the rest. Cody's entire worldview hinges on the belief that leadership grants entitlement. His wife's contributions, financial, emotional, or domestic, were always framed as proof of devotion, never as assets requiring recognition. When those contributions are tallied, they reveal an unmistakable truth. The patriarch's kingdom was financed by the very women he demeaned. Janelle's situation, in particular, borders on tragicomedy. The most competent of the wives, she spent years managing the family's finances, earning the lion's share of their income and funding properties she would never own. And yet, when she dares question the fairness of these arrangements, she's accused of rebellion. The irony is rich. The woman who built the empire is cast as its threat, while the man who squandered it is worshipped as its savior.
Even Mary, often dismissed as emotionally fragile, demonstrates more acumen than the supposed head of the household. Her Utah bed and breakfast, purchased without Cody's involvement, stands as the only independently successful business venture any of them have. The woman branded as desperate has become the only one truly free. Her silence now reads less as submission and more as financial literacy. Of course, none of this would matter if the land itself were worth the myth built around it. Coyote Pass, stripped of its romantic symbolism, is little more than undeveloped desert saddled with loans and missing utilities. They can't build on it until it's paid off, which, given Cody's fiscal acrobatics, may be sometime after the next apocalypse. The family compound was never feasible. It was a mirage sold by a man who confuses ambition with competence. The practical barriers are laughable. No water, no power, no sewer, and roads better suited for livestock than luxury homes. Yet Cody, ever the visionary, bragged about the deal he got by agreeing to install utilities himself. Translation: he bought land that can't sustain a dwelling and congratulated himself for saving money by doubling the cost of development. When confronted with this reality, he retreated into his usual defense, denial seasoned with blame. He didn't mismanage, the wives simply lacked faith. The pattern is relentless. Each time his plans implode, Cody reinvents the failure as proof of his persecution. He was thwarted by ungrateful wives, by the bank, by the economy, never by his own staggering incompetence. His empire runs not on money or faith, but on excuses. Meanwhile, the wives' loyalty has become a liability. Mary and Janelle's names appear and vanish from deeds like ghosts, their ownership shifting in the night to the Cody-Robin Trust. Christine, the only one shrewd enough to sign over her lot in exchange for hard cash, made the cleanest exit. She understood that freedom is worth more than equity in a desert dream. She walked away solvent, leaving the rest of them to untangle the legal and emotional foreclosure that remains. Coyote Pass, once the symbol of a shared future, now functions as an archaeological site for delusion. Each document, each deed transfer, each tearful confessional serves as evidence in the ongoing case study of how self-righteousness corrodes reason. The land isn't cursed, it's simply managed by people who confuse control for stewardship and ego for enterprise. And yet,
For all the mismanagement and betrayal, there's a dark sort of justice in it. Cody's empire, built on manipulation, now teeters on the brink of legal and financial collapse. The same cameras he once used to preach family unity have become a public archive of his deceit. His wives, the women he alternately ignored, insulted, and exploited, are now his most credible witnesses. The show that once celebrated his patriarchal fantasy has evolved into his own deposition. Every episode is evidence, every word a future exhibit. And if there is any cosmic fairness left in this saga, it will be the courts, not the cameras, that deliver the final cut. Every delusion eventually meets its reckoning. And for Cody Brown, that reckoning arrives not as a thunderous collapse, but as a slow, humiliating unraveling. One deed, one confession, one misplaced sob at a time. The empire he so proudly ruled through emotional manipulation and financial sleight of hand has shrunk into a single expensive house and an unpaid desert. It is a fitting end for a man who mistook dominance for devotion and ego for leadership. Coyote Pass, his supposed legacy, now serves as both metaphor and evidence. Once envisioned as a sprawling family compound, a monument to celestial unity, it stands barren, unpaid, and symbolically bankrupt. The dream was never architectural, it was psychological. It allowed Cody to sell the fantasy of control while quietly stripping his wives of their independence, their assets, and their illusions. Now that the fantasy has evaporated, all that remains is sand, debt, and tape. And what a gift that tape is. In the age of self-documentation, few tyrants have had the misfortune of recording their own downfall in 4K resolution. Each episode of this ongoing melodrama doubles as testimony. Cody admitting on camera that he considered cheating one wife, dismissing another's rightful claim, and justifying every selfish act as spiritual destiny. Even his allies have started handing ammunition to the opposition. Robin's breathless confessions about Cody quickly choosing names for lots without consent would make any contract lawyer salivate. One wonders if she realizes she's essentially narrated the family's own legal obituary.
The irony of Robin's performance is delicious. The woman who once positioned herself as the family's moral compass has become its most self-incriminating witness. Her attempts at innocence, her weepy insistence that she never wanted all this, are indistinguishable from confession. Whether she's naive or manipulative is almost irrelevant now. The damage is done. By admitting that Cody unilaterally divided property and executed documents without consent, she handed Mary and Janelle a potential goldmine of legal defenses. Misrepresentation, fraud, lack of mutual agreement, the works. The Celestial Kingdom may soon have a very terrestrial courtroom. If the gods of irony are kind, Mary and Janelle will finally do what they should have done years ago. Lawyer up. Not for vengeance, but for justice. And perhaps for precedent. The legal gray area surrounding plural marriages has long shielded men like Cody, allowing them to reap marital benefits without marital accountability. But the combination of decades of recorded evidence, financial entanglement, and public statements might finally puncture that bubble. It would be poetic justice if the man who spent years sermonizing about family principle became the inadvertent case study that grants women in similar arrangements the right to financial protection. Of course, the notion of fairness has never been welcome currency in Cody's economy. His self-image depends on being both the victim and the visionary. To admit fault would be to destroy the myth, and so he clings to the narrative that everything fell apart because his wives lacked faith. It's the same tired defense used by every failed autocrat who mistakes obedience for loyalty. Yet the cracks in his authority are now canyons. Christine, the first to defect, left with her money and her dignity intact. She saw the game, took her payout, and walked. Janelle and Mary, slower to abandon hope, now seem poised to follow her lead.
not out of bitterness, but survival instinct. Each of them has realized that Cody's family vision was never about shared destiny. It was about shared debt. What makes this downfall particularly rich is that Cody's undoing isn't the work of enemies. It's the work of documentation. For years, he curated his public image as a righteous patriarch guiding a modern plural family through adversity. But the camera doesn't edit intent. It captures the flicker of greed behind every pious justification, the contempt curling through every family discussion, the sheer incompetence that masqueraded as ambition. The world didn't expose him, he exposed himself. And now, as the dust of Coyote Pass settles, the mythology crumbles. The one big house he championed, a structure meant to consolidate wives, resources, and power under his single command, was never rejected for its logistics. It was rejected for what it represented: permanent subjugation. When the wives refused, he didn't revise the plan, he withdrew entirely, retreating into his McMansion like a sulking emperor whose subjects dared to demand borders. His subsequent justifications, that utilities were too costly, that the market shifted, that maybe God didn't want it, are merely fig leaves covering a truth too embarrassing to admit. He failed. The reality is that Coyote Pass was never going to be built. It wasn't a dream, it was a distraction. It served its purpose as a bargaining chip to lure the wives to Flagstaff, and as a narrative to keep them compliant. Once the illusion had achieved its goal, Cody lost interest, just as he has with every wife who ceased to orbit him. The land's unfinished state isn't an accident, it's an allegory. His empire was always built on promises he never intended to keep. What remains then is the reckoning, not merely legal or financial, but moral. Cody's notion of leadership has always been extractive. He measures love in loyalty, loyalty in obedience, and obedience in what can be monetized. But the women he underestimated have evolved beyond his reach. Mary no longer needs validation. She has her own income, her own property, and, perhaps most dangerously, her own perspective. Janelle, once his quiet enabler, now speaks the language of equity and ownership with a fluency that terrifies him. And Christine, from the safe distance of her new life, remains the living proof that life after Cody is not only possible, but preferable. Even Robin, his once devoted partner in moral theater, shows cracks in her performance. Her despair has turned from performative to existential. The tears no longer seem like tools. They look like regret. Whether she regrets her role in the betrayal or merely the loss of status is unclear, but the silence between her and Cody grows louder by the episode. The alliance that once thrived on shared superiority now sits on a mountain of shared debt.
It is tempting to view this saga as simple poetic justice, the manipulator undone by his own manipulations. But it's also something more revealing, a cautionary tale about the fragility of authority built on control rather than respect. Cody's kingdom collapsed not because his wives betrayed him, but because they finally stopped believing him. Faith, once withdrawn, leaves no collateral. And so, the great patriarch of plural marriage ends his reign, surrounded not by wives and children, but by unpaid bills, unsold land, and the faint echo of his own delusions. He wanted legacy, he got litigation. He wanted worship, he got witnesses. Mary and Janelle, the supposed remnants of his once mighty household, now hold the real power, the legal, financial, and narrative leverage that could dismantle what remains of his authority. They may never sue, but the mere possibility hangs over him like a desert storm. He knows it, the audience knows it, and perhaps, in her most unguarded moments, even Robin knows it. The tragedy of Cody Brown isn't that he lost control, it's that he never understood what control really was. Leadership is earned, manipulation is borrowed. And like any bad loan, it eventually comes due. Coyote Pass will one day be sold, parceled, or repossessed. The proceeds, if there are any, will likely vanish into the same financial black hole that devoured the family's dreams. But its symbolic value will remain. It stands as the monument to a man who believed himself chosen, a prophet of prosperity who couldn't manage a payment plan, and a family that mistook suffering for sanctity until they finally learned the difference. When the dust clears, Cody will still be in his McMansion, surrounded by the silence he once demanded. The wives he dismissed as liabilities will be living proof that liberation begins with loss. And perhaps, somewhere, on that barren stretch of Arizona soil, a realtor will finally post the sign that should have been there from the start. Coyote Pass, sold as is, no utilities, no integrity, no refunds. Subscribe.